Hello, I'm Katty Kane, Washington. Christian Fraser is in London. Students from Parkland, Florida want Congress to act. Republicans in Congress made it pretty clear today they aren't interested. On the issue of whether to add new laws to restrict the sale of guns in America, the Republican leadership is unlikely to take up any fresh proposals.
But polling in the country does show public opinion has shifted on the issue, even among Republican voters. So let's take a look at one survey. This is CBS. In December last year, 29% of Republicans said laws covering gun sales should be stricter. And when they were asked the same question again last week, look at that, the percentage has gone up to 43%. Or in this CNN poll on stricter gun laws, in October 2017, just after the shooting in Las Vegas, 52% said they favoured more controls versus 44% against. But compare that to now, 70% of those asked whether they were in favour of stricter gun laws, while those against drops to 27%. And those numbers seem to be out of sync with the House Speaker, Paul Ryan, who was speaking earlier.
We shouldn't be banning guns for law-abiding citizens. We should be focusing on making sure that citizens who should not get guns in the first place don't get those guns. And that is why we see a big breakdown in the system here. In this particular case, there were a lot of breakdowns.
Well, a short while ago, I spoke to Democratic Representative Val Demings from Florida. She served as Orlando's police department before she became a lawmaker. Congresswoman, it seems pretty clear from listening to Republicans after they met on the issue of school shootings today that they're really not prepared to do very much, if anything at all, in terms of new legislation around the issue of gun control in the country. Are you disappointed? Did you expect that the shooting at Parkland might have changed their minds?
Well, you know, what I do expect is that the young people who are advocating for change are not going away. These students, most of them not even old enough to vote yet, have had the blood of their friends and their classmates splattered upon them. They're not going to let it go. I have been disappointed, though, in the Republicans' response. How many more shootings? 150,000 children in this country have been exposed to school shootings. But what I do know is that this group of young people will not let it go. This is the generation that we've taught when things are wrong, you work to make them right. And they're going to hold the Republicans and all of Congress accountable.
And it does seem that those Floridians are asking for more than Congress is at the moment contemplating. Let me ask you about the issue of mental health, because this is something that the president has clearly raised and many of your Republican colleagues are raising as the primary issue behind these school shootings. You were a former chief police for the Orlando district. Was there something under Florida law that you could have done to prevent somebody like Nikolas Cruz from owning a gun?
Well, we certainly need to work on our laws, because unless the person has made a threat against a specific person, then it's tough to consider that a crime. When I hear the president and members of the Republican Party talk about mental illness, it's just a distraction. What we need to do is get serious about legislation that will keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, those who are mentally ill, criminals, terrorists, and others. We've got to work on the legislation.
My understanding, Congresswoman, is that the bar for people who are in law enforcement, a police officer like you used to be, to actually go into somebody's home and take their weapons away from them, even if they are somebody who has been reported as having mental problems, the bar for doing that is incredibly high. So you would not have been able as a police officer to take Nikolas Cruz's weapons away from him.
That's absolutely correct, and that's why we are pushing the Gun Violence Restraining Order Act, which would have given the Broward County Sheriff's Office and other law enforcement all over the country the opportunity to go in and temporarily remove weapons from the home of someone who had made statements, someone who exhibited behavior that the family members thought was a danger to themselves or others. Legislation like that would have given law enforcement the tools that they would have needed to remove those weapons.
And as a former police officer, what do you make of the president's idea of arming teachers in schools?
It's an idea that I've heard before, but when it comes out of the mouth of the commander-in-chief, I know of nothing that has been proposed yet that is more ridiculous than arming our teachers and our principals. I talked to several of them in the district. They reminded me as a lawmaker that they signed up to educate our children. They did not sign up to get in a gunfight with an active shooter. It is the most ridiculous thing I've heard, and I would hope the president and others would abandon that idea.
Congresswoman Val Demings, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So clearly there are some fairly stiff headwinds coming from Congress to some of the president's proposals, Cathy, not least the one to arm teachers. But I can sort of understand where some of the Republicans are coming from. They're facing new energy on the left. They've got primaries in the spring. They're hardly likely to, get into a row with their Second Amendment supporters back at home when they can't see clear leadership from the president. Which sort of position is he going to adopt on gun laws? And that's not very clear.
Yeah, and he has been pretty vague ever since Parkland, talking about, well, we're going to do something about mental health. We're going to make it impossible for somebody to get guns who has a mental health problem. But as you heard from the Congresswoman, they're actually, in practical terms, it's incredibly difficult to take guns away from people. And the system of background checks, well, that may be tightened up a little bit. They may try to make sure that laws that are on the books are actually enforced. But I think last week there was some perception, looking at what was happening in the United States and looking at those incredible students who turned up in Florida, that something new would happen. That's what I'm skeptical about this week. My sense is, as members of Congress have come back into town after the weekend, that actually the energy in favor of tighter gun laws just has evaporated in the country. And people, even though they're hearing from Florida, we want more, I would be very surprised if they moved on that.
It's that standpoint, isn't it, that the problem with guns is best solved by supplying more guns. There is incredulity on this side of the Atlantic to that sort of solution. Anyway, before we move on...
Understandably.
Exactly. But before we move on, can we just revisit this meeting the president had yesterday with the governors? You might have seen this. He was confronted during the meeting by the Washington State Governor, Jay Inslee, who doesn't like the idea of arming teachers. Just take a look.
Now, I understand you have suggested this, and we suggest things, and sometimes then we listen to people about it. Maybe they don't look so good a little later. So I just suggest we need a little less tweeting here, a little more listening, and let's just take that off the table and move forward.
Now, we're going to watch that clip again, but only this time we're going to watch it with the camera on President Trump. It is a study in body language, and you know I like body language, Cathy. Watch this.
So I just suggest we need a little less tweeting here, a little more listening, and let's just take that off the table and move forward.
All right, thank you very much.
We're going to move on to the governor of Texas now.
Yeah.
I'm just going to move this microphone, and I know where I'd like to put it. Could he have bristled a little more?
Thank you very much. Please, can you shut up now?
Yeah. That is fabulous.
Yeah, he didn't look like he loved that, did he?
No. I don't think the Washington State governor is his cup of tea. He was probably thinking, can I lock him up with Hillary Clinton? I don't know.
Yeah, not invited back.
No.